Holy doubt, Batman, when faith is not enough. My name is Michael Robbins with the Swedenborgian Spiritual Community of Puget Sound. We are here in Washington, and I am with my friend Tom Muller. He is the Reverend up or down in Hillside in the Bay Area.
Wonderful to be here. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Michael. We figured, by the way, excuse my voice. I recently recovered from pneumonia, so my voice is still a little bit messed up. So bear with me on that. It's good to see several awesome people join, many of whom I know. So that's really nice. Michael already introduced me. It's really nice to be up here and to be sharing this time together. And what we figured we would do is kind of a very simplified, abbreviated format of the service that we do at the Swedenborgian Society of the East Bay, which is also known as Hillside and Urban Sanctuary. So we'll be having a two kinds of guided / silent meditation, a couple of readings. I'll share a little bit of thoughts that I've had around the topic of doubt and wisdom and truth, and then we'll have some dialogue about that. And then we'll finish up with another short silent meditation. So if that sounds good to everyone and we're all ready, so why don't we begin by kind of just centering ourselves, making ourselves comfortable, taking some deep breaths, closing our eyes if we'd like to, releasing some physical tension from our bodies. Let's be conscious of our breath, of those deep breaths we're taking. Conscious of our bodies, of our surroundings. And while all of us gathering virtually right now are physically separate, let's really manifest that Swedenborgian teaching that closeness on a spiritual level is a matter of affinity, of affection. So let's spiritually build a sacred circle this morning with each of the people that is tuning in right now. And let us, beyond space and time, include those that are tuning in later, watching the recording. Let's create that circle of awareness, of positivity that transcends time and space. And let's connect to a common center and visualize that center as a flame, as the open word, as whatever image helps you connect to that divine source of love and wisdom. And let's face that source together. Open ourselves up to be illuminated by love, by wisdom, in whichever way the divine has in store for us as we gather. And let's maintain that inner state of receptiveness, of openness, as we hear and receive and contemplate today's readings. And our first reading comes from Proverbs.
The Lord brought me forth as the first of his works before his deeds of old. I was formed long ages ago at the beginning when the world came to be, when there were no watery depths. I was given birth, when there were no springs overflowing with water, before the mountains were settled in place, before the hills. I was given birth before he made the world or its fields or any of the dust of the earth. I was there when he set the heavens in place, when he marked out the horizon on the face of the deep, when he established the clouds and fixed securely the fountains of the deep, when he gave the sea its bounty, so the waters would not overstep his command, and when he marked out the foundations of the earth. Then I was constantly at his side. I was filled with delight day after day, rejoicing always in his presence, rejoicing in the whole world, and delighting in mankind. Now then, my children, listen to me. Blessed are those who keep my ways. Listen to my instruction and be wise. Do not disregard it. Blessed are those who listen to me, watching daily at my doors, waiting at my doorway.
That was wisdom speaking. And now from a work by Emanuel Swedenborg, Doctrine of Faith, and this is from the first section. Nowadays, people understand faith to mean nothing more than thinking that something is true because the church teaches it, and not because it is obvious to the intellect. In fact, the common saying is, believe and don't doubt. If someone replies, I don't understand, people say, that is why you have to believe it. The result is that today's faith is faith in the unknown and can be called blind faith. And since it involves a decree from one person to another, it is faith handed down from the past. This is not a spiritual faith. Real faith is simply recognizing that something is so because it is true. This means that people who are devoted to real faith both think and say, this is true, and that is why I believe it. Faith is dependent on truth, and what is true is the object of faith.
The final reading is A Prayer to Sophia by Joyce Rupp. Radiant and unfading wisdom, your deep love calls to me. I seek you with all my heart. Hasten to make yourself known. Sit at the gate of my heart. Teach me your ways. Meet me in every thought. Attune my mind to your perceptions. Open all that is closed within me. I desire your instruction. I long to receive and share your love. Dance on the path of my life. Free me from all that hinders. Deepen all that attracts me to you.
Let's spend about a minute in silence as we contemplate those readings. In many ways, this is a continuation of a conversation that Michael and I have been having recently around faith. One of the things that inspired you to create your podcast, Crosshatched, and that whole question around what are some of the unique ways in which Swedenborg and Swedenborgianism conceptualize that idea of what faith is, such a common term that is so often misunderstood. You read just now when Swedenborg defines what faith actually means, in some ways, he seems to be identifying faith as kind of the opposite of how we often are used to
Right.
thinking of faith in
Uh-huh.
a Judeo-Christian context, where rather than faith being a belief in something despite it not making sense, Swedenborg says true faith, spiritual faith, is actually believing something because it makes sense, because
Mhm.
it is true. So to Swedenborg, there's not necessarily a value, as so many traditions do place a lot of value on this notion of believing things in spite of them not making sense. His approach is that it's perfectly fine to have doubt, and it's perfectly fine to question things. And that it is through that process of reflection, of honest inquiry, that we connect ourselves with the divine and with those deeper realities, more subtle realities about life. Swedenborg, of course, believed that he writes this beautifully in Divine Love and Wisdom 170. And I'm paraphrasing here, but Divine Love and Wisdom 170, Swedenborg talks about how the object, the purpose of all of creation is a reunion of the created universe with the creator by means of being receptive of the divine's qualities, which are love and wisdom. Love and truth would be another common translation. The love part, of course, I think kind of makes sense, even though it's often harder, easier said than done, so to speak. But the notion that love, meaning selflessness, caring for other people, is a virtue, I think is pretty non-controversial, although we, of course, may have different ideas of what that is.
Mm.
Truth, of course, seems, I think, to a lot of us elusive, especially when it comes to the big questions, so to speak, right? So, in some ways, we might be inclined to simply grasp onto ideas that feel good or that sound good. And to some degree, if it makes us a better person, that's actually okay. You know, we can all go through stages of development. But when it comes to the truth aspect, that truth is only, and integrating that truth is only possible when we freely choose to engage that truth and when we make a decision to contemplate it and to weigh its opposites. Swedenborg talks about how angels in heaven actually have a gift, which is that whenever they are presented with an idea, they are automatically presented with its opposite.
Oh.
So even in that state of having realized true love and true wisdom, true intelligence, true rationality, there is still that need to freely inquire about realities
Mm.
and make them one's own.
Mm.
So part of our conversation today, and where I hope that, you know, maybe the folks tuning in, and of course, Michael, we might have some dialogue on is how can we make that happen in our lives? How is this something that becomes a useful tool in our spiritual development? And how do we sometimes maybe have to reprogram ourselves or allow ourselves to be reprogrammed from that notion of believing things because one ought to believe them, and seeing how rich beliefs and what Swedenborg calls a spiritual faith can be once we've gone through that process. If you really think about it from your own experience, you can probably relate to how maybe there are ideas when you were younger that you just kind of accepted because someone else told you to. Maybe it's a authority figure, whether that's a parent or a religious authority or some kind of other ideological authority. And it's kind of cool. It kind of works to a certain degree. You know, you kind of grasp onto these ideas. But if you compare that to the depth and the affection of an idea that you've actually honestly engaged, even perhaps through something that I like to call sacred disillusionment. You know, Swedenborg has this concept of vastation, that sometimes we really need to engage and struggle with ideas in order to truly integrate them,
Mm.
right? And sometimes having a falling out with an idea, even if it's true, can be extremely helpful because it gives us a chance to interrogate it and to then embrace it from our own volition. And that's one way in which we unite wisdom and affection, love and truth, is when we allow ourselves to fall in love with an idea not because we're told to, but because we go through that truly inquisitive process. So I know that Michael has a bunch of awesome things to say about this. And if any of you tuning in now are not familiar with Michael's podcast, please do subscribe and like and so forth and engage with that, because Michael really engages that question a lot. And so I'd love to kind of, maybe we can start with
Yeah.
Michael kind of uh, complaining about what I just said, if you have an interest in that, or
Or I mean,
dissecting.
the vexation that, made so much sense because I feel like I've gone a bit on this arc where, um, I've been really picking apart this idea of salvation or atonement through faith alone, which a lot of you know theology out there suggests that you have to believe in this god or this or that, and what is that more than an opinion, right? Though this is my opinion of the afterlife, and the god is called this, and that our opinions and our beliefs are so fluid and changing in their strength and their weakness. It just really seemed like a farce to say, oh, you have to believe in this thing and all done. um and so while I'm still very much on that train, I'm also kind of coming back to um the power of faith as well, and maybe and splitting these two things up where faith manifesting, this could be a real thing where the strength of your faith is tied to maybe your efficacy in prayer or your ability to manifest things. I mean, a lot of writers say, if there's something you really want, pretend as if it's already true, right?
Sure.
And that whole conversation and, definition or perspective of faith is a very different thing than saying, your faith depends on your afterlife, where you go in your afterlife, right?
Yeah.
But in English, it's the same word, faith. I mean, gosh, it can even mean what religion are you, right? What faith are
Right.
you?
What is your
And our small limited language, I feel, is kind of convoluted this word of faith with these different meanings and these different implications. And so yeah, kind of part of what I feel my mission is to break that down into the pieces parts, and perhaps come to a different understanding.
Yeah, that's excellent. I love that. And I feel like you bring up something that is really important to bear in mind, is that I think also Swedenborg has a really beautiful, useful way of imagining this, is that while we are in this natural state, we will never truly fully grasp everything with absolute certainty.
Right.
And that's fine. Is that this idea that this life consists of appearances of truth. But even when they are appearances, we can choose appearances that make sense. And we shouldn't simply accept the appearances for what they are without interrogating them, if that
Mm.
makes any sense.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed the freedom to, interrogate these words and these questions, and it even brought me to a point in, connecting these dots where, okay, if we're put on this planet and we have this semblance of free will, this free will can't exist if somebody is telling you what to do and what to believe, and you don't have any right or ability to question that for yourself. And so I think that's where the holy doubt comes in, that our gift of discernment, our gift of freedom to critique, um it has this, it's a God-given right. There's a holiness to it,
Mhm.
in, ultimately how we, get to decisions or get to faith, that that we've had that freedom to honestly make these inquiries. And yeah, I mean, I was a little concerned that the subhead, when faith is not enough, could be read as you need faith and something else for salvation, which does not actually align with our theology. It's much more about love being of use and service, um, and I feel that it's a natural conclusion, is if you stop concerning yourself with the faith part, and, what is your religion or your opinion on the spiritual world, and if that can be put aside for a moment, then what's left? And to me, it seems like a very natural conclusion that, well, if, yeah, you've taken, the religious opinions out of it, then being of service, being of use is, is the divine inspiration. And yeah, of course, Swedenborg says a lot about that.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, I mean, I guess it really depends on, again, how you define faith, right? It's I would say faith is necessary when we understand faith as, um, what we kind of just talked about with Swedenborg's idea of faith, which is acknowledging things that are true,
Mm,
right? Because if we don't have that kind of faith, that spiritual faith that we have, then we would simply be deceiving us, right?
mm,
But I guess if we think about faith as, again, something that, as we sort of commonly refer to it, right? Believing things because we're told to believe them.
mm,
There's no value in that spiritually whatsoever. It might get us to a certain stage. Like if we are inclined to murder people, and Swedenborg actually talks about this specifically, if, that there are stages, and that kind of gets back to the appearances. Is like if you are really a terrible person and you really like hurting other people. And the only thing that gets you to a place where you stop hurting other people is a belief that there's a hell where you'll be punished
right.
for that.
Yes,
There is some use in
there's
that.
value in that for sure.
And Swedenborg would say that's a falsity. Hell is not a place where people are punished for anything, or heaven is not a place where we are rewarded. These are simply spiritual states that we choose to inhabit or not, right?
Mm, mm,
But on a certain level of our spiritual development, even a quote unquote faith in something that isn't real can have its use,
right,
but it's only ever a tool to get there.
right.
We tend to kind of grasp onto these ideas as being salvific in and of themselves, right?
I don't think this is too tangential, but it reminded me of, there's a podcaster who does a lot of near death experience videos, and she was making note that there's a lot of fake AI
Hmm.
NDEs out
Oh
there,
yeah.
right? Now, I find that kind of appalling. I call them out. They're greedy marketers. They're lying. They're doing it for the clicks,
Hmm.
almost taking advantage of people's longing for certainty of an afterlife, taking advantage of that for money.
Yeah.
She was much kinder. She
Hmm.
was actually suggesting, hey, you know what? If these stories make people feel better and help bring them along, fine. But you should know that, yeah, there's a lot of fake AI and DE stories out there.
Yeah. AI slop is truly pervasive everywhere. Feels like every day there's another realm that I realize it's, oh, whoa, wait, this is actually AI.
Oh,
So
yeah, right.
that's a whole other topic we can get into at some
But it
point.
does tie in, though, to questioning the reality. I feel like
Hmm.
because of AI, we're doing that more and more. Is this real? Is this true?
That's a good point. And it's not like there wasn't a lot of fake NDEs before that. People love to BS about that, right? So you're right. Maybe that does give us another reminder to interrogate what we're being told.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah, it's so important. And I feel like there are um it's yeah, it's something that comes through a lot of cults that put this emphasis
Mm.
on believing a certain thing. And, even though, you might see this other truth, they're trying to hammer away on you that, ignore that, it's fake news, this is the real truth over here. And it's kind of one of the first rants I started off on Crosshatch was it feels like everybody's trying to convince us of something.
Mm.
There's a lot of energy put
Sure.
into believe me, believe this. And I think if we are able to inspire that independent inquiry,
Mm.
right? In kind of giving people the tools and the strength of how to question.
Yeah.
It's been a really nice journey through Crosshatched and um making these inquiries and I mean literally doing the scientific research. I mean there was a bit that I did about psychics and I kind of thought like, psychics had some veracity and I yeah, pulled up some study about psychics used by detectives, right, for
Yeah.
crime.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
Yeah. And the data was not supportive.
Hmm.
There may be some other data out there that, substantiates it more, but the report that I saw was like, yeah, there was a detective who used a bunch of psychics and he was like, yeah, they're distracting. They
Hmm.
lead me off off the wrong way. And so yeah, I kinda thought that, yeah, there would be a bit more evidence, and so, in some ways, me going through this, I'm asking the questions, I'm learning myself, I'm presenting the audience with the research and the evidence
Sure.
that I see, and, uh, yeah, it's great to be able to do that without this dogmatic attachment to a specific truth, to a specific outcome, to have that honest inquiry and not have I mean, that's how I sign it off, right? You can be detached and still subscribe to Crosshatch.
Yeah.
Like it's it's not always a bad thing to have a bit of detachment from, that outcome and just do the honest inquiry, do the research and come to a reasonable conclusion.
Or an unreasonable conclusion.
Well, yeah, you get into string theory and it's not going to be that reasonable.
Hmm.
There's some cool stuff coming out with, yeah, space news and just incredible breakthroughs and revelations and um, knowledge and theories about the cosmos. And actually, I was kind of joking about this, how um, there was there's kind of like this conflicting debate whether the universe will forever expand or if it will ever come back into like one singularity and repeat the Big Bang,
Mhm.
right? And some news came out of it that maybe like, oh, all the evidence was really pushing towards continued expansion, but now it's a little more even-handed that it might collapse again. Um, and and I thought, here this theory, this notion, does the universe expand forever or does it come back together? This is a huge intergalactic cosmic belief, one or the other. And yet you don't have people fighting in the streets over their belief of whether the universe is going to expand forever or not.
Not yet.
I thought how funny that would be if people got so worked up about about that they were, forming committees and having battles and trash talking and
But yeah, cool.
yeah.
In that case, why don't we kind of conclude this format and have
Mm,
another moment of silent meditation
sounds good.
and then go from there? By the way, you may or may not hear the sound bowl. It's one of those things where when you do Zoom or whatever program, it picks up certain frequencies and not others.
Huh.
So it'll be curious to see afterwards. Let me know if this particular song bowl was audible. But in either case, let's just maybe make ourselves extra comfortable again and just spend another moment in silent awareness with each other and with the divine source and center. And may the love and the wisdom of the Holy One be with us and all creatures. Amen. Thank you so much for tuning in.